One-foot-flipper.
Hi, Paige here, the 1 Foot Flipper, and today we're going to talk about those long tail eBay stores full of bad items. Are they actually a bad idea? Could they be a good idea? Let's look at it. And really, we're going to look at how to configure a long tail eBay store full of basically crap items. As I've said before, I have two stores. I have my good store and I have my bad card store. They both make money for me in different ways. And when you're setting up your long tail store, you get to throw away a lot of that conventional eBay wisdom, all that stuff I'm telling you to do, like researching your prices carefully and not buying crap. Throw all that away. The goal of your long tail store is to get it set up, and then it will generate a fairly steady stream of monthly income with very little work from you outside of the shipping. In fact, I've ignored my long tail store for months at a time, and the sales haven't even gone down during that period of time. I won't put a single item in for 4 months, and then it'll get a bunch of it'll have a bunch of room opened up and the number of listings it gets per month, and then I'll fill it back up. Sales don't change. The idea behind the long tail store is that you're going to have thousands of items in it. I suggest 11,000 of easy to list, easy to ship items that are extremely easy and inexpensive to source. This store, if you set it up right, should create a steady stream of monthly income. Mine was clearing $600 a month, but it's recently gone up to $700 as I've tuned my promoted listings, and that's after all expensive. My sales total is actually like double that. And guess what? That's enough money to maximize my IRA every single year. And it tends to make more money a month than the antique booths of most of my friends, what they tell me that they clear. And it's less work, and I don't have to leave the house for the thing. Now, I'm suggesting that you specifically target an 11,000 item long tail store because that is what the eBay Basic Store gives you. They give you 1,000 normal listings and 10,000 listings in those select categories. You know, those specifically chosen at almost no reason, rhyme or reason categories that eBay gives you. And you need to set a hard item limit on the store, and since this one is built into the system, that's the one I say you go with. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself doing what a lot of your sad and lonely and complaining eBay sellers do, which is endlessly increasing their store size with items that don't sell in order to somehow try to make a full-time living, and that is a path to madness. You want to primarily be looking in your eBay life or reselling life, whatever, you want to primarily be looking for good items with good sell-through rates. You don't want your main line to be crap. The long tail store is just meant to be a side thing is simply extremely easy to maintain once you sell it up, and you should just be able to find the inventory for it over time in bulk for almost nothing as you're doing your other regular sourcing. Now, the items in your long tail store, they need to meet some certain criteria. They need to be small. After all, you need to somehow store 11,000 of these items without it taking over your entire life. So you're not going to have a long tail tractor store. You're not going to have a long tail hubcap store. That's not going to work. And they need to primarily be in categories that eBay gives extra listings in. And finally, they need to be something that at some point could attract either a browsing customer or a customer who needs a very specific item. Postcards, trading cards, yearbooks, small specific repair parts would fit those bill nicely. I suggest don't put anything in your store bigger than a hat. And we're only getting into hats because hats squish up very nicely and you can get quite a lot of them into a rather small amount of space. You know, your regular trucker hats, they just nest right inside each other. But your entire store can't be hats either, because hats aren't part of the select category, so you couldn't have more than 1,000 hats in that store even if you wanted to. Not sure actually how much 1,000 hats takes up, nicely squished together once listed. I'll find out soon. If you can see all of this mess in the background, I've purchased 300 hats in the last week. That'll be a different video. And finally, I suggest you never list anything cheaper than $2.99 plus shipping. And that low price is for things like trading cards or postcards that take you under a minute to list using a document camera. You'll want a much higher minimum price on items that actually need a full photo session or that take up more space. Like your hats, you might have a $10, $12 minimum price on your hats. That's fine. Now, let's look at the select categories for the extra listings and evaluate them. I really enjoy things that can ship standard envelope, that can just go into an envelope here. And for something to go standard envelope, it needs to be able to make it through the automated postal system. That means it can't be more than 3 ounces, can't be more than a 1/4 inch thick, and it can't be too rigid. I've got other videos on that, but just if you weren't aware of it, that's what it is. And the reason is that those items tend to be really easy to store, and shipping takes less of a bite out of the transaction. If it's under a 1 ouncer, it's 69 cents. If it's a 3 ouncer, it's only like $1.15. And thing is, eBay allows many more categories to use standard envelope than the instruction or tutorial pages on eBay list. And just to make sure I wasn't cheating, I've gone through and read the actual terms and conditions of using the standard envelope service. And in that multi-page legalese document, you will find it does not care what the item is whatsoever. It only cares what category you list the item in. They never mention what the items are in terms and condition. They just say it can only be used in categories which it's enabled in. And it's impossible to use it in categories it's not enabled in. It won't generate the envelope. And that's hundreds of categories. And that includes catch-all categories like everything else. There's a document on the... Ooh, my eye is itching. There's a document, a spreadsheet on eBay you can download that shows the current categories. It's usually correct. Most recently, I found the only error in it I could find is it shows the video game category is enabled, but the video game category is no longer enabled. Probably because people were trying to ship loose PlayStation discs in envelopes. Really, the only video games you could actually send standard envelope are Switch games and Nintendo DS games. Those are small enough. You can stick those between a couple of trading cards into one of those plastic sleeves, tape it inside the envelope off center, and ship it off. But if you're doing that with those video games, you need to list them in the everything else category, not in the video game category. People will still find them anyway. Don't worry about it. And if eBay is your religion for some reason, and you've just got to stick yourself to not only the legal terms and conditions, but the spirit of them. The reason that video game is listed in the everything else category is because it comes with 2 Pokemon cards and a plastic sleeve. So therefore, it has to be everything else, because otherwise it is a mixed lot. All right. Lost my mind there just for a moment. Hey, if you've made it this far, can you hit that subscribe button? It doesn't cost you anything, and seeing that number goes up is basically what I'm in this whole thing for. All right, let's get into the categories. I'm just going to go in the order that it's listed on the page. Sports memorabilia, cards and fan shop, sports trading cards. And notice I was going through the category list. Basically, it's just the sports trading card category. No. No, 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 no. Sports cards are a trap. Being successful in sports cards involves careful management, complete vigilance, being unbelievably selective in your merchandise, and being incredibly knowledgeable about the sports card scene. You cannot fire and forget random sports cards for $3 plus shipping, because none of them will ever sell. People aren't browsing and buying 91 Topps cards. People aren't even browsing and spending $3 on, random, slightly upgraded hollow version of a bass player from 7 years ago who's not a superstar. No, that stuff isn't selling at all. The entire sports card world revolves around 2 things. New releases, hoping that those rookies are going to be the next, Michael Jordan, or older cards with real established values. You could actually have yourself a 10,000 card store full of actually interesting $3 sports cards, not 1990 Topps, but you still might not sell even 2 of them a day. Unless the player is a superstar, then interest in them falls off every single year, and that is not compatible with what we're doing here. We need stuff that will still be sellable years later and that might even improve with age. So, on that category, let's go to the next one. Collectible card games. This category works. However, you only want to deal with two types of collectible card games. You want to deal with Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. And you only want to bother listing your shiny, your holo, or your foil cards, or your cards with a rarity of rare or higher. In the Magic cards, they'll have a gold symbol here for the rarity. Pokemon, the symbols are different, and they're in different places in different sets, but if you're going to get into it, you can look that up. And these cards that you're listing, they should be the leftover of collections that have already been picked for the cards of real value. Because if you do get that collection, you want to pick the cards of real value out and sell them separately. You don't just want to toss every card into your long tail store. And you don't want to toss commons or uncommons in there at all. Unless they're extremely old, in which case you can go ahead and do it. Now, most of these cards, in reality, worth 10 cents or less. This card, it's a rare. It's probably worth 10 cents. But over time, browsing customers will buy them anyway. And the ever-fluctuating prices that is natural in the collectible card game universe will eventually start bringing some of those old cards up to higher values where they'll eventually sell. I can always tell when an old card really pops because I'll go from not having sold a copy of a card in a year to selling all nine of my copies I have of the card in a span of 3 or 4 days. And you don't want to deal with any card game other than Magic or Pokemon. Yu-Gi-Oh! They reprint all the cards constantly. The customers are terrible. And those old bulk rares, they don't rise up in value over time and sell. And you need a larger knowledge base just to sell Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. It's not suitable for fire and forget. While every other game out there either has no singles market or it absolutely will completely fail before you even sell 10% of your inventory. Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Are the only eternal collectible card games. Every other collectible card game, there's been thousands of them now, have all eventually fallen into obscurity and failed. Or are either still in obscurity or are working on their way to it. There are a few older dead card games that do have singles market, but you're just unlikely to ever encounter them, so we can ignore them entirely. You're probably not going to find Illuminati New World Order cards anywhere. I mean, I specialize in cards, and I've only found them once, so you're not going to find them. All right, next category. Oh, I'm mentioning that Illuminati because Illuminati does have a functioning singles market, but they haven't made the cards in 30 years. And they didn't sell nearly as well as Magic or Pokemon or any of that, so you're never going to find them. Next category, music. No, oh my God, no, do not. Music is a trap. Every single physical music format, other than vinyl, is busy seeking zero in price for the average album. And vinyl both takes up too much space for what we're doing here. You know how much space 11,000 records would take up? A lot. And vinyl also requires you to be selective. Half of it will never sell even in a long-term crap store. More than half. Ignore the music category. The music category is a Bolos only category, much suited for your main store. If you're going to get a record in the first place or a CD or whatever, it needs to be something that's good enough to sell right now, not something you might worry about selling 10 years later. All right, next. Books and magazines. Say no to magazines entirely. Anything in magazines that would actually ever sell is good enough for your real store. Otherwise, never going to move. Random old-time magazines or National Geographics, whatever, Ladies' Home Journal, don't do it. And books are almost entirely a no as well, for the same reason the music is. Nearly the entire category is just constantly busy seeking that zero value. And when I say that zero value, I mean where it gets to the point where you cannot ship the item out at a profit. The buy it now shipped price goes below what it cost you to do the transaction. You should only put books in your long tail store that are incredibly obscure and are, maybe looking for that right buyer. There's already multiple copies of the book on eBay. Don't bother. either stick it in your main store and try to undercut, or don't buy it in the first place. If there is one copy, then you need to stick yours at like half the price of the other copy. Because the guy who listed the other copy, he probably pulled the price out of his butt. Because I've noticed that most rare book sellers on eBay do this. They have incredibly gigantic stores full of incredibly overpriced books with a sell-through rate of basically zero. You know, they'll be lucky to sell 2 books a day. Sure, they might get $30 a book, but they won't sell but 2 books a day, and they'll have 30,000 books listed. No, they're making the mistakes of thinking that their rare book is a bigger deal than it is, and when the customer finally shows up for it, the customer's deciding, I'm not going to buy it. When that customer shows up to buy that book, you want him to buy it. You don't want to scare him off, because another one may not come for years. All right, next category, movies and TVs. No. All movies and TV in all formats are busy seeking zero in price. Any exceptions to those rules are bolos, and they need to be sold in your main store as quickly as possible before they either shrink down to zero value over time, or they suddenly show up on Netflix and go to zero value instantly. So forget about your DVDs, your Blu-rays, your VHS. Forget about it. Even your Laserdiscs, your CDs, forget about them too. Laserdiscs and CDs are far too cheap for how rare they are and how much space they take up. And have horrible sell-through rates. Next category, video games. Ignore this entire category. Everything in it is either busy seeking zero value or is good enough for your main store. There's really nothing in between. Those old Madden games and Xbox 360 shooters that are selling for $5.99 now, they're never going to creep up in value. Because the install base of those old consoles goes down daily while the supply of games on the market increases daily. Those games will never go up in any real fashion. I mean, they might creep up over time, but only with inflation to be creeping up to where they're still selling for 25 cents over what it costs for the transaction and the shipping. Just stay out of it or put it in your real store. Stamps. I don't sell stamps myself, but I think it's a great long tail category if you love the category and you're already kind of pretty long in the tail yourself. You see, stamp collecting is a hobby in serious decline. The age of the average stamp collector is quite old, and it goes up every single year. If you're 20 years old, you do not want to load up on stamps, because you will find yourself stuck with thousands of worthless stamp listings 30 years from now that'll really never sell then. But if you're already over 50, you'll be dead by the time stamp collecting's dead, so sure, no problem, sell some stamps. But do remember, the overwhelming majority of stamps ever produced are in all reality worth no more than their cover price. And that cover price effectively goes down in value every single year due to inflation. Next up, crafts. Crafts are a great long tail item. You want to concentrate on your small and your flat crafting items. They're easily sourced for pennies on the dollar at garage sales or the Goodwill bins, and they generally tend to burp, and then they tend to increase in value as they get older. In your regular store, a lot of craft stuff is awful, but for long tail, it's absolutely great. Next category, party supplies. You're not going to specialize in this, but these items can be easy to find for nearly free. Cake toppers, little party banners you can fold up, candles with Bert and Ernie on them. Whatever you can find that fit in that category, especially if it's older, good thing to throw in there. I'd avoid the newer stuff. They can get that at the dollar store. The final one on the list is collectibles. This should likely be your main focus unless you're doing stamps, photos, and the photos are actually in the collectibles category. At least that's where you should be listing them, or cards of some sort. I suggest you stick to your small collectibles and Christmas items myself. In fact, your entire long tail crap store could be all Christmas. Christmas sells year-round. I mean, it sells most of Christmas, but it sells year-round, and it can be sourced cheaply year-round. Although your actual large and valuable Christmas items need to go in your main store. You don't want a 19-inch tall animated Santa overpriced in your long tail store where you're making no effort to sell it and it could be taking up that shelf space for years. You want little ornaments, small things, flat Christmas items, the ones that aren't good enough for the real store. But the thing about Christmas items is that people break their Christmas items, their older ones, and they want to replace it with the exact same thing. And it doesn't matter if the item had any initial real value. If Grandma's 1978, whatever it is, ornament gets broken, they're going to go on eBay to find a replacement. It didn't matter if that ornament was actually had any intrinsic value. They find yours, they're going to buy it. And there's Christmas browsers too. And okay, here's when I said, you don't want that animated Santa in your store where you're taking no effort to sell it. The reason why is we're going to get the crux to the long tail store. The crux is that you're not putting any effort into any of it. No price research. You're not running sales. You're not doing markdown schedules. You aren't sending out offers. You might want to send out offers. I send out once a week. I go in and send a 5% offer out. You're not ending and selling similar. You don't care when and if any specific item sells. All you care about is the monthly income the store produces and filling the empty slots as they empty out. That's it. Over time, fluctuating prices, inflation, browsing, and the right customer finally showing up is going to sell your items. The only real store management you need to do is to fine-tune your promoted listing percentages to create the results that you want. When setting up your store, main thing you want to do is make sure that you have your store categories. Do you know what a store category is? You can make your own categories and set your items into both a store category and an eBay category. You want your store categories segregated into categories that you're going to promote, categories you don't need to promote. Items that are waiting for the right customer, such as obscure repair parts, yearbooks, or items tied to specific places and events, they don't need to be promoted. Like if you've got a hat that says, 2011 Shawnee, Mississippi Cancer Walk, you don't need to promote that item. That item is only selling if the person lost their Cancer Walk hat or otherwise was related to that event and wants to buy it later, or is collecting cancer-related hats for some reason. That's somebody somewhere. Somewhere out there in America, somebody is collecting cancer-related hats. Think about that. Is it you? Is it the guy who lives in your basement? Somebody's doing it. Really, for those items, you're just waiting for that right customer to show up, but you're going to want to promote everything else. Everything else in your long tail store. Most of your sales are going to come from promoted listings. And you just need to get over the fact that eBay is going to get a bigger cut of normal from this store than they do from your main store. It doesn't matter. All this store cares about is money in, which is going to round down to zero once you really get it going. And limiting itself to using the same amount of real estate inside your house. Like, if you've got a bunch of shelving units in your basement, you may want to limit your long tail store to one, floor to ceiling, 4 foot wide, 2 foot deep shelving unit. Everything there is the long tail store, and you don't let it escape from there. I don't personally segregate mine from my other items, but most of mine are cards. And I'm probably going to segregate them as the cards are replaced with things that aren't cards, because I'm filling in hats and Christmas and other collectibles as the cards sell through. So when sourcing and setting up your long tail store, like I said earlier, ignore everything you know about being a good eBay seller. You are most concerned about your purchases being nearly free and being able to be listed fast. This means you don't do any research at all. Everything gets 2 photos, front and back. You guess the price, and the best title you can crap out of your head in 8 seconds. And then you move on to the next item. And filling up the long tail store is going to take a long time. It took me a couple years to fill mine up, to be honest. But that was, alongside of selling real items and everything else. I mean, you could work on it in your leisure. Get some listings in here and there. You're waiting for your spouse to get ready so you can leave the house. Don't have anything major to do. Plow 10 more items into that long tail store. You'll get there eventually. And if you've got small flats, you could literally list hundreds of items per day for a while until you got there. And let's talk about photos for a second. I love document cameras for the long tail store. Here's one right here. As they're directly connected to your computer, and you can take the 2 photos for each item as you list. Photo, flip item, photo. Notice how I said computer. You absolutely need to be using a computer to have a long tail store. The difference in minimum time it takes to do the most basic listing on phone versus PC, and the difficulty of managing a huge eBay account on the phone makes the PC a necessity. Your time won't be worth it if you're using the phone. Honestly, you should be using the PC anyway. You know, you could do your taxes on your phone, but when you go to your accountant, he's not doing your taxes on his phone. He's using a computer. He's probably using a desktop PC unless he's coming to you. And desktop PCs are the best tools. Desktop, not laptops. Laptops are only marginally better than phones due to tiny screen real estate, god-awful keyboards, and limited USB ports. If you really get your PC listing station set up, you can end up with a lot of stuff plugged into it. I mean, I've got multiple cameras, barcode scanners, all sorts of stuff. I'm using a lot of USB ports. All right, next, let's talk about your prices. Everything in your long tail store needs to be priced reasonably for the class of item that it is. You sell vintage postcards, photographs, you're sending them standard envelope, you price them at $20, you'll probably sell one of them per year. If you price them all at $3 to $5, then they will sell constantly. The idea is to make the price good enough that your browsing customer will just buy the item impulsively without seeking out a better price on the same item. And they don't all have to be priced the exact same price either. You can use a little judgment. You can say, oh, this photo looks cooler than the other one. I'll list it for $1 more. That's fine. But don't think this photo looks cooler than the other one. I'll list it for $27 because it's not going to sell. For a title, just do your best. Hit all the keywords you can. Fill that title up. Don't worry about the item specifics. They are not worth your time. Fill in the bare minimum. Item specifics in these kind of categories are seldom searched for specifically anyway. The title should contain everything you need. In fact, you might find it worth your time for whatever items that you're going to most specialize in. You know, if it's Christmas ornaments, you might want to have your base Christmas ornament listed that you can sell similar off of that already kind of has all the item specifics blanked out in one manner or another. That way you don't have to sit there and fill them in as you do it. That's up to you. Now, some of you, not going to name any names, but you know who I'm talking about. You know that guy down the street, the one you see at the flea market all the time? Some of you probably already have long-tail crap stores that you're trying to somehow make work as your main thing via constant store expansion. Or that maybe would work if your prices weren't too high, or at least work in how I'm describing it. You need to set a hard limit on your number of items, or else you're going to spiral that store out of control. Before you know it, you're paying for the 100,000 item store. Your entire house is filled with worthless stuff, and you are still barely making McDonald's shift manager money. The long tail store is completely meant to be a sideline where you can take advantage of deals you find on otherwise essentially worthless items in bulk and turn them into something that grinds out money every single month. Mine currently is up to clearing $700 a month, and I take 6 to 8 hours a month on it between shipping and filling in the empty listing spots. Hey, that's $100 an hour. But it took me a long time of setup to get to that $100 an hour. Don't try to scale it up. Because, for one thing, the setup time is immense. You don't want to scale 10,000 up to 100,000 because you're going to spend 10 years doing it. And even then, if you made it work, oh my goodness, it'd be the most tedious grind that you could possibly imagine. Can you imagine spending your entire day taking photos of, pulling out and shipping $3 to $5 postcards or trading cards or what. You know how boring that is? I mean, I get annoyed just shipping the trading cards on my account now. If it was 10x, ugh, couldn't even imagine it. All right, hey, thanks for making it all the way to the end. Tell me how wrong I am down in the comments. Hey, add your own favorite long tail items in the comments as well. Thanks, and I hope to see you again soon.
See, that's One Foot Flipper's nonsense video.
Hey, let's give a little real talk, those of us who are left, about something for a second. We're going to talk about tacos. How come Jack in the Box was able to keep its tacos 2 for $1 for 30 years? While Taco Bell, who specializes in tacos, you know, seems like they'd be better at it, could do it faster or more efficiently, they had to triple their prices in tacos in the same amount of time. Doesn't make sense. I think it's a conspiracy.